The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, but Lena's eyes were wide open. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. Normally, his late replies didn't bother her. He was always busy, always working, or so he said. But tonight, her chest felt heavy. Something deep inside her whispered that she should not trust the silence. Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it quickly, expecting a simple good night, or maybe an excuse for being too tired to call. But instead, the screen burned her eyes with something she never wanted to see. It was a photo, a blurred, laughing selfie taken in the soft glow of a bar. His arm was wrapped tightly around another girl's waist. Their faces were close, their smiles careless and bright, as if they had no secrets in the world. Beneath it was a short message that killed something inside her. "Can't wait to see you again." Lena's heart didn't just break. It froze. Her breath caught in her throat, and the phone almost slipped from her hands. For a moment she thought maybe she was dreaming, that her tired eyes were playing tricks. But no, the photo was real. The timestamp was from just an hour ago. While she sat waiting for him, thinking of his promises, he was out there, laughing with another woman. She did not cry right away. Instead, she sat perfectly still, the way a deer does when it realizes it has been hunted. The room seemed smaller, the shadows darker. She had given this man everything. Her time, her trust, her sacrifices. She had quit classes to help him when he asked, worked long hours to support their plans, even cut ties with friends when he said they were bad influences. And this was how he paid her back. A photo, a laugh, a lie uncovered by accident. Her fingers trembled, but she forced herself to unlock her gallery. She scrolled through their old pictures, their first trip together, his silly smile on her birthday, the long walks in the rain where he swore he would never leave her. Each memory now looked poisoned, a cruel joke played at her expense. She hovered over the delete button, but her thumb refused to press it. Destroying the photos felt like letting him escape too easily. Instead, she did something strange. She downloaded the new photo, the one that exposed him. Then she printed it on her old machine, watching as the paper slid out with his betrayal stamped across it. She stared at the woman's face, Naomi, a name she recognized from his half-hearted stories. A friend, he once said. A friend who now smiled with his arm locked around her waist. Lena folded the photo neatly and slipped it into the back pocket of her jeans. She didn't know why. Maybe because she needed to carry the proof. Maybe because she didn't trust herself not to forget, not to weaken later. The hours passed slowly. Outside, cars hissed along wet streets, and a lonely siren echoed through the night. But inside her apartment, time felt broken. She sat with the phone still in her hand, her eyes dry, her mind racing. Anger tried to rise inside her, but it was drowned by a heavier feeling. Betrayal, sharp and deep. She thought of all the nights she had waited for him, all the lies she had believed. She thought of the way he told her, "You're the only one who understands me," and how she had believed it with her whole heart. She thought of the times he looked into her eyes and promised forever. And she thought of how easily he had thrown it away for a new laugh, a new thrill. By dawn, her body was exhausted, but her mind was sharper than it had ever been. The tears never came. Instead, a strange calm settled over her. It was not the calm of forgiveness, nor of acceptance. It was the calm of someone who has seen the truth and decided never to be blind again. She got dressed slowly, tying her hair back with steady hands. She held her coffee like a soldier preparing for battle. And when she stepped outside, the world looked different. The morning air felt colder, but it filled her lungs with something new. Resolve. Lena told herself she wouldn't confront him yet. She wouldn't storm into his life screaming. She wouldn't give him the power of seeing her broken. No, she would stay quiet, watchful. She would see how he moved, how he lied, how easily he carried on while she bled inside. But in her heart, she already knew. This was not just heartbreak. This was the beginning of something darker. The flame inside her was small now, but it would grow. It would grow until he felt the same cold emptiness he had given her. The night had stolen her light, but it had also given her a new purpose. The woman he betrayed was gone. The woman who walked out into the day was someone else entirely. Someone patient, someone dangerous, someone who would not rest until justice was hers. And though the city around her moved as if nothing had changed, Lena knew her world never would be the same again. The night her love died was the same night her revenge was born. Lena did not rush. The photo was still in her pocket, folded neatly like a secret weapon. Every time her hand brushed against it, the anger inside her stirred again, sharp and steady. She had decided she would not cry. She would not beg. She would not throw herself at his feet. No, she would watch. She would learn. And then, she would burn his world the way he had burned hers. The first step was to know his moves. Lena became a shadow. She knew his routine already. Years of love had taught her the exact rhythm of his life. She remembered the time he usually left for work, the corner cafe where he always bought his morning coffee, the bus route he took when his car broke down, the streets he walked with careless confidence. But now, instead of waiting at home like a loyal partner, Lena followed from a distance. It began small. She watched him from across the street as he leaned against the cafe counter, smiling too easily at the young waitress. She stood by a bus stop while he laughed loudly into his phone, his face glowing in the light of the screen. Once, she trailed him far enough to see him slip into a small restaurant, where Naomi, the girl from the photo, was already waiting with a wide smile. Lena's stomach twisted at the sight, but she forced herself to stay calm. Her hands trembled inside her pockets, but her face remained blank. She watched them share food, lean close, whisper as if the whole world belonged only to them. Each moment hurt like glass cutting into her skin, but each moment also fed the fire. When she returned home that night, she opened a notebook. The first page she wrote only one word: proof. Beneath it she listed the time, the place, and the names. Every day she added more. Screenshots of messages she had found. Photos of them together. The hours he claimed to be busy. The nights he didn't answer. Slowly, the notebook filled like a map, each line connecting to another, weaving a story of lies that he thought would never surface. But Lena was not only gathering evidence. She was also learning patience. She had always been quick to forgive, always too soft, always too ready to accept his words as truth. That Lena was gone. This Lena had become colder, sharper. She did not want a quick outburst. She wanted a storm that would last. Her revenge needed to be slow, quiet, painful. The first spark she lit was small, almost invisible. She mailed an anonymous envelope to his mother. Inside, she placed two things: a copy of the laughing photo with Naomi, and a printout of an old promise he once made to Lena in writing. "I will never betray you. You're my forever." She did not add any words. She wanted his mother to see the contrast for herself, to see the son she loved reduced to a liar. Days later, Lena sat in a cafe near his apartment and watched from the window. She saw him outside, pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his face pale and angry. She knew the call was from his mother. She watched the way his free hand shook as he dragged it through his hair. She smiled into her coffee cup. The fire had started. But even as she made her moves, Lena could not escape the weight in her chest. Late at night, when the city grew quiet, the memories attacked her. She would lie in bed and think of the times she had laughed with him the same way Naomi did now. She would remember how he used to hold her hand, how he whispered that she was the only one who understood him. The memories were cruel. They came with knives, cutting her again and again. One night she broke down. She sat on the floor of her apartment, hugging her knees, tears finally pouring out after days of silence. The sound of her crying filled the empty room. She wept for the love she had lost, for the pieces of herself she had given away, for the years she could never get back. But when the tears ended, something new rose in their place. Strength. The kind of strength that comes from knowing you have already survived the worst. She wiped her face, stood up, and returned to her notebook. Her voice was hoarse, but steady, as she whispered to herself, "He thinks I am weak. He thinks I will disappear. But he doesn't know me anymore. The next morning, she decided to get closer. Not to him, never to him, but to Naomi. If she wanted to destroy him completely, she needed to understand the girl he had chosen over her. At first, it seemed impossible. But fate handed Lena an opening. She learned, through Naomi's public posts online, that Naomi volunteered once a week at a local charity booth. And so Lena appeared there, not as an enemy, but as a quiet stranger offering to help. Naomi was friendly, warm, and unsuspecting. She talked easily about her job, her hobbies, even her weekend trips. Lena smiled and nodded, hiding the storm inside her. She listened carefully as Naomi mentioned a recent conference trip with him, how sweet he had been, how much fun they had. Every word stabbed Lena deeper, but she kept her mask in place. By the time the day ended, Lena had learned enough. Where they went, what they did, how he introduced her. She had all the confirmation she needed. The betrayal wasn't a single night's mistake. It was a long, careful lie. When Lena returned home that evening, she opened her notebook again. She added Naomi's words, every detail, every careless confession. Then she closed the book slowly, her hands steady. The small fire had grown. The threads were weaving into a net that would soon close around him. And Lena, once broken, now felt the power of control. She had been the victim once, but not anymore. This was only the second step. And the fire was just beginning to spread. The nights were the hardest. Lena could spend the day collecting facts, watching from a distance, writing in her notebook like a detective solving a case. But when the darkness returned and the streets outside grew quiet, her mind would open doors she didn't want to enter. She called them memory rooms. In one room, she saw the holiday they had taken together. She could almost smell the sea, hear his laugh as he pulled her into the water. In another room, she saw the small cafe where he held her hand for the first time. His eyes had been full of promises then, promises that now tasted like poison. Each memory felt alive, as if she were walking through her past and watching it burn. She hated it. She hated that her mind refused to let go. She hated that while he laughed with Naomi, she was trapped in these memory rooms, forced to relive every moment that once made her believe in him. The pain was not just heartbreak. It was humiliation. She had given everything, and he had thrown it away as if it meant nothing. Sometimes the anger kept her standing. Other times, the sorrow pulled her to the floor. One night, she curled up in the corner of her apartment, hugging her knees, crying into the silence. Her tears were bitter, hot, endless. She felt small, weak, invisible. But when the storm passed, she wiped her face and stood again. Every tear only carved her harder, sharper. She whispered to herself, "This pain will not kill me. It will build me." The next day, Lena made a choice. She would not only watch him. She would also place herself closer to Naomi. She wanted to know what Naomi thought, what Naomi felt, what lies he had fed her. If she understood that, she would know exactly how to break him. It was not difficult. Naomi was young, open, and far too trusting. At the charity booth where Lena had appeared once, she returned again, acting casual, as if volunteering had always been part of her routine. Naomi greeted her with a bright smile, grateful for the help. They worked side by side, folding clothes and arranging food for those in need. Naomi talked a lot, her voice light and careless. She mentioned weekend trips, late-night drives, dinners where he made her laugh so much she couldn't breathe. Lena listened, nodding, smiling, even laughing at times, though inside her chest something tightened with every word. Naomi didn't know who Lena was. She had no idea that the woman beside her was the ghost of the person she had replaced. And Lena preferred it that way. She didn't want Naomi's sympathy. She didn't want explanations. She wanted knowledge. And Naomi, in her innocence, gave it freely. By the end of the day, Lena knew more than she needed to. The hotels they had stayed in, the restaurants he had taken her to, even the nickname he whispered into Naomi's ear when no one else was listening. The same nickname he once used for Lena. That night, Lena opened her notebook again. She wrote it all down. Every detail, every slip of the tongue, every careless confession. She stared at the pages until the words blurred. The anger came back, heavier this time. She slammed the notebook shut and threw it onto the table. She wanted to smash everything in her apartment, wanted to break plates, wanted to scream until the walls cracked. But she didn't. She sat back down and forced herself to breathe. Revenge was not about noise. It was about patience. Still, the pain twisted in her chest. She walked into her bathroom and looked into the mirror. Her face looked tired, older somehow. Her eyes carrying shadows that had never been there before. She touched the glass as if touching another woman entirely. She whispered, "He made me this way. He broke me. But he will pay for it." In the days that followed, Lena continued her silent game. She followed him at a distance, sometimes blending into crowds, sometimes sitting in quiet corners of cafes. She watched him laugh, watched him lie, watched him walk hand in hand with Naomi as if the world were his to play with. Each sight was painful, yes, but it also fueled her determination. She was no longer the woman who waited at home. She was the shadow now, the one watching, the one building something far stronger than anger. The memory rooms still came at night, haunting her with what used to be. But slowly, even those began to change. Instead of seeing only love, she started to see lies. She noticed the way he looked away when he said, "Forever." She remembered the excuses he made that never made sense. The memory rooms were no longer filled with joy. They were filled with cracks she had once ignored. And with every crack she remembered, her resolve hardened. One evening, after another silent day of watching, she returned home and opened her notebook again. This time, she didn't just write facts. She wrote a sentence across a new page, a sentence that made her hands steady and her breath calm. "He destroyed me. I will destroy him slowly." She closed the book gently, like closing a coffin. She turned off the lights and sat in the darkness. Her mind was no longer only filled with memory rooms. Now it carried blueprints, plans. The pain was still there, deep and raw. But now it had a direction. And Lena knew this was no longer just survival. This was transformation. The woman who cried alone in the night was fading. The woman who was rising from those ashes was someone entirely new. Someone dangerous. Someone who would not stop until justice was carved into his life the way betrayal had been carved into hers. This was only the third step. The memory rooms had hurt her, but they had also prepared her. The fire inside her was spreading, and soon it would consume him. Revenge did not come all at once. It grew slowly, like a storm building at the edge of the sky. Lena had spent weeks watching, writing, listening. She had walked through her memory rooms, faced the ghosts of love, and turned her pain into a weapon. Now it was time to use it. But she knew the first move had to be careful. Revenge was not about rage. Rage burned too quickly, left ashes and nothing more. No, her revenge had to be smart, controlled, and sharp. It had to cut him where it hurt, but not destroy him all at once. She wanted him to feel the fear of losing piece by piece. Lena studied him the way one studies prey. She knew what mattered to him most. Not love, not loyalty. He had thrown those away without hesitation. What he valued most was his pride, his reputation, his carefully polished image of being the charming man everyone trusted. That was his armor, and she would crack it. She spent several nights gathering everything she had. Receipts of his business trips that were actually dates with Naomi, screenshots of his flirtations, notes about his lies. She organized them into a clean folder, neat and professional. No anger, no emotional words, only facts. Then she slipped the folder into an envelope and mailed it to his office. Not to him, but to his employer. She also sent copies to 2 important clients whose names she remembered from his bragging stories. It was her first real cut. Lena didn't expect fireworks. She knew the cut would be quiet, almost invisible at first. But soon she would see the effect. And she was right. The next week, she sat in her usual cafe, pretending to read while she kept her eyes on the building across the street. His office. She saw him walk in, his shoulders straight, his head high. But later, when he came out, something about him had changed. His steps were quicker, his jaw tighter. He kept glancing at his phone, his face pale. The whispers had begun. At work, people started looking at him differently. The manager called him into a private meeting. One client canceled a deal, claiming personal reasons. He walked into the staff room and heard laughter die down the second he entered. He didn't know who was behind it. He didn't know how the truth had leaked, but he felt the walls closing in. Lena watched all of this from a distance, sipping her coffee with calm eyes. She didn't smile, didn't cheer. She only noted it down in her book. One cut, small but deep. That night he tried to call her. The phone buzzed on her table. His name lit up the screen, the same name that once made her heart race. For a moment, her hand hovered over the answer button. Part of her wanted to hear his voice, to know if he was scared. But then she remembered Naomi's laugh, remembered the photo, remembered the nights she cried alone. She let the phone ring until it went silent. The next day he sent a message. "We need to talk. Someone is trying to ruin me." Lena stared at the words, her lips pressing into a thin line. She typed nothing. She deleted nothing. She simply locked the screen and placed the phone face down. He was beginning to feel it, the panic, the confusion, the loss of control. But Lena knew this was only the start. Still, even as she watched him suffer, her heart felt strange. She did not feel pure joy. Revenge was not sweet, not yet. It was heavy, complicated. She still hurt. She still remembered the warmth of his arms, the way he once kissed her forehead as if she were the most important person in his world. The memories stung, even as she watched his pride bleed. Late at night, she asked herself if she was becoming someone else, someone darker. But every time doubt rose, she reminded herself, he chose this. He had taken her love, crushed it, and replaced it with betrayal. He had ruined her life without hesitation. And now he was paying for it. The following week, his face told the story. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, his once easy smile gone. Naomi posted fewer pictures. The happy glow around him was fading. He began to look over his shoulder more often, as if suspecting eyes were always on him. Lena saw it, and for the first time in weeks, she slept peacefully. But revenge is a greedy fire. One cut was not enough. The fire inside her whispered for more. It told her he deserved more pain, more loss, more nights of fear. So Lena sharpened her resolve. The first cut had drawn blood. The next would go deeper. She picked up her notebook, flipped to a new page, and wrote one sentence across it in bold letters. "This is only the beginning." Then she closed the book and sat in the silence of her apartment. The weight of sorrow still lived in her chest, but now it was joined by something else. Control. She was no longer the broken woman he had left behind. She was the one pulling the strings, slowly turning his life into the same darkness he had left her in. And as she stared out the window at the quiet night, Lena knew the storm she had begun was far from over. The first cut was made. The next would come soon. The first cut had shaken him, but it did not end him. Lena knew that. Prideful men like him always thought they could rebuild their mask, fix their lies, charm their way back into the world. But what he didn't realize was that his mask was already cracking. And once a crack appears in a mirror, it will only spread until the whole thing shatters. Lena was patient. She stayed in the shadows, watching as the days dragged him lower. He walked with stiff shoulders now, his once bright laugh replaced by a thin, nervous smile. She saw him argue on the phone in public, his voice harsh, his gestures wild. His confidence, the thing he wore like armor, was slipping away piece by piece. But she was not done. For weeks she had been quietly collecting more proof, not just of betrayal, but of the little frauds he thought no one noticed. Duplicate receipts, fake travel claims, stories he told his boss about working late when he was actually spending nights with Naomi. He had left trails everywhere. Careless trails. Trails Lena had followed and gathered like broken glass. She packaged them neatly, just like before, and sent them to the right place. This time not to clients, but directly to the accounting office of his company. No angry notes. No emotional accusations. Only numbers, receipts, and cold facts. It did not take long. Within days, whispers turned into questions. questions turned into an internal review. He was called into meetings he could not talk his way out of. And soon he was placed on leave. Lena sat at her window that evening and watched the rain fall, the city glowing in yellow lights. She imagined him pacing in his apartment, his world closing in on him, and she felt something strange. Not joy, not exactly relief, but power. For the first time, she was not the one broken. He was, but cracks spread quickly. And soon, even Naomi began to feel them. Lena saw it online first. Naomi's bright photos with him grew fewer. The happy captions grew shorter. One video appeared where Naomi's eyes looked red, her smile weak. She spoke about being misled, about how people sometimes wear masks and fool hearts. Lena watched the video twice, then closed it. She should have felt victory, but instead, she felt complicated. Naomi was not innocent, but she was not the one who had promised Lena forever. Naomi had been fooled too, and for a brief moment, Lena felt pity. But pity did not erase betrayal. The mirror of his life was breaking fast now. He no longer looked like the man who once walked proudly through crowds. He looked hunted, smaller, weaker, and still he did not know who was behind it. He tried to control the story, to blame jealous people, to beg a few loyal friends for help, but most of them stopped answering his calls. The world had grown cold around him. Then he made a mistake. He thought he could scare Lena. Perhaps he suspected her, or perhaps desperation made him reckless. One evening he called her workplace. He spoke to her manager, weaving lies, pretending to be a concerned friend. He suggested Lena was unstable, that she had been harassing him, that she was not the employee they believed she was. But what he didn't know was that Lena had already prepared for this. She had copies of everything, proof of his betrayal, proof of his fraud, proof of his cruelty. She had trusted a lawyer friend with the documents, in case he ever tried to turn the tables. So when her manager called her in and repeated his words, Lena stayed calm. She showed quiet proof, enough to silence the doubts. Her job was safe. His attempt to harm her only exposed his desperation. Lena realized then that he was losing more than his reputation. He was losing control. He was like a drowning man, grabbing at anything, pulling harder and harder, but only sinking faster. One rainy night, he finally broke the distance. He came to her building. He waited in the lobby like a man cornered by the world. His eyes were wild, his hands trembling as he saw her step in. "You," he spat, his voice shaking with anger and fear. "It's you, isn't it? You're the one behind this. Why are you doing this to me?" Lena looked at him, truly looked at him. He was not the man she once loved. That man had been a dream, an illusion. This man was smaller, weaker, broken by his own lies. She did not shout. She did not cry. She only pulled a small envelope from her bag and handed it to him. Inside were photographs, dates, and receipts, the same proof she had been collecting for months. She spoke softly, her words calm and sharp. "This," she said, "is not me ruining you. This is you ruining yourself. I just gave the world the chance to see it." His face twisted, his pride bleeding through his fear. He tried to shout, tried to threaten, tried to beg. But his words were empty, powerless. Lena turned away, leaving him in the lobby with shaking hands and a mirror full of cracks. He had no one left to blame but himself. That night, Lena sat by her window once again, the city lights flickering against the glass. The fire inside her burned steady. She had not destroyed him yet, not completely. But his mask was gone, his pride shattered. The mirror of his life was breaking. Soon it would shatter completely, and Lena would be there, watching, waiting, until every piece cut him the way he had once cut her. The storm he once controlled had turned against him. For years he had been the hunter, the man who chose, lied, and left without consequences. But now, every step he took seemed to pull him deeper into a trap he couldn't escape. At first, he tried to deny it. He told himself the whispers at work would die down, that Naomi's tears would fade, that his friends would return if he explained enough. But the world no longer listened to him. His words had lost their shine. His smile no longer convinced anyone. He was crumbling, and people could smell the weakness on him. Lena watched from the shadows. She saw him grow restless, his once confident walk replaced with hurried steps, his eyes darting around as if the walls themselves carried judgment. He was beginning to see it, the invisible hands closing in on him. And when a hunter feels trapped, he becomes dangerous. One night, in a burst of desperation, he came to her door. He didn't knock politely. He banged, shouting her name. His voice was cracked with panic, but it carried the same arrogance it always had. "I know it's you," he shouted. "You're trying to destroy me. Why? After everything I gave you, why?" Inside, Lena stood still, her back pressed against the wall. She didn't open the door. She didn't respond. She only listened to the sound of his fists pounding against the wood, his rage spilling into the hallway. For a moment she felt fear, not because he could hurt her, but because she saw how far he was willing to fall to protect his pride. Finally, he stopped. She heard his footsteps retreat, heavy and uneven, as if he were carrying the weight of 1,000 failures. She waited in silence until the night swallowed his presence. The next day, he tried another move. He called mutual friends, spinning lies about Lena. He told them she was obsessed, unstable, that she was ruining his life out of jealousy. Some believed him for a moment, but most had already seen the truth in the evidence that floated around his ruined name. His lies could no longer hold. When that failed, he tried to attack her where it hurt most, her work. He called her office again, this time louder, more desperate, weaving stories about harassment and obsession. But Lena was ready. She had left a trail of proof behind, carefully stored and trusted with the right people. His words bounced off the wall of truth she had built. Every attempt he made to hurt her only exposed his desperation. Every lie he told only widened the cracks in his life. Lena realized then that he was no longer the hunter. He was the prey, thrashing in a net he had woven with his own hands. But the trap was not complete yet. One evening, she waited for him outside his office building. He walked out looking smaller than she had ever seen him. His shoulders bent, his tie loosened, his face pale. He saw her standing there and froze. For a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then he walked toward her, his steps heavy, his eyes hollow. "Why?" he whispered, his voice broken this time, no longer angry but pleading. "Why are you doing this? I've lost everything. Please just stop. I can't take it anymore." Lena looked at him, her face calm, her eyes steady. She saw not the man she had once loved, but the liar who had destroyed her, the coward who had hidden behind charm. "This isn't me doing this," she said softly. "This is you. Your lies. Your choices. I only showed the truth." He shook his head, his hands trembling. "You don't understand. Without my work, without my name, I'm nothing." Lena's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, not of joy but of clarity. "Now you know how it feels to be left with nothing." His eyes filled with something close to tears, but he turned away quickly, unable to let her see. He walked off into the night, his figure small, his steps unsteady. Lena stood there watching him disappear. She felt no pity, no regret, only a heavy calm. The hunter had seen the trap. He knew he was caught, and soon the net would tighten until he could no longer breathe. That night, Lena returned to her apartment and opened her notebook. She flipped through the pages filled with proof, lies, and plans. Then she started a new page and wrote in neat, steady letters, "The end is near. The final cut will come soon." She closed the book and sat in silence. The city outside moved on. Cars passing, people laughing, life continuing as if nothing had changed. But inside her, the fire burned steady, ready for the last strike. For the first time in months, Lena slept without nightmares. She had faced him, watched him crumble, and left him in the shadow of his own ruin. The hunter had become the hunted, and the trap had almost closed. The city was alive with its usual noise, but for Lena, the world had grown quiet. Revenge was no longer a wildfire in her chest. It had become something calmer, steadier, more dangerous. She had watched him fall step by step, His pride broken, his friends gone, his job slipping away. He was no longer the man who once walked with arrogance. He was only a shell, trembling in the ruins of his own lies. But Lena knew her story was not finished. She had cut him, trapped him, cornered him. Now it was time for the final blow, the one that would leave him with scars he could never heal. She thought carefully. Revenge, to her, was never about shouting or fighting. It was about truth. The truth was sharper than any knife, heavier than any stone. And so she decided the last strike would be the truth written out so clearly that no one in his life could ignore it. One night, Lena sat at her desk with her notebook open. She gathered all the pieces, the receipts, the screenshots, the photographs, the timelines, Naomi's careless confessions. She built them into a single document. It wasn't messy or emotional. It was clean, cold, professional. A story of betrayal written in facts. When she finished, she printed copies and sealed them in envelopes. She sent them not only to his workplace but also to his family. His father, who had always believed his son was honorable. His sister, who had framed photos of him on her walls. She wanted them to see what he truly was. It was not out of cruelty. It was justice. He had taken her love, her trust, her future. Now she would take the one thing he valued most, the image others held of him. Days later, she heard the result. His father called him furious, his voice carrying disappointment sharper than anger. His sister removed his photos from her walls. The family gatherings he once bragged about became silent places where his name was spoken with shame. He had lost not just his job, not just his reputation, but also the trust of the people who mattered most to him. When Lena saw him again, it was by chance. She was walking down a quiet street when he appeared at the other end. His steps slow, his shoulders bent. He looked smaller, older, as if years had been carved into his face overnight. He stopped when he saw her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, with heavy steps, he approached. His eyes were hollow, his voice low. "Please," he whispered. "Stop. You've destroyed everything. I have nothing left." Lena looked at him, her face unreadable. She thought of the nights she had cried alone, the mornings she had forced herself to breathe, the memories that cut her like knives. She thought of the promises he had made and broken without hesitation. And then she spoke, her voice calm, almost gentle. "I didn't destroy you," she said. "You destroyed yourself. I only showed the world what you are." His lips trembled, his eyes wet, but no words came. He tried to hold her gaze, but he couldn't. He looked away, ashamed, broken. Lena stepped past him without another glance. She didn't need to see him beg, didn't need to hear his excuses. Her revenge was complete. He had lost the one thing he could never rebuild, the mask he wore to the world. That night, Lena returned to her apartment and opened her window. The air was cool, the city lights glowing in the distance. She took out the last photograph, the one that had started it all, and held it over the flame of a candle. The paper curled, darkened, and turned to ash. She watched it fall into a small dish, the ashes scattering like dust. It was over. The pain in her chest was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer the pain of betrayal. It was the weight of survival. She had walked through fire and come out the other side. Revenge had not made her happy. It had not erased the nights of sorrow. But it had given her something else, power. She had taken control back from the man who once held it over her. She was no longer the broken woman crying in the dark. She was the woman who stood tall, steady, unshaken. And as she stood by the window, the ashes drifting into the night, Lena whispered to herself, not in anger, but in certainty. "He will never forget me. He will never escape what he did. And I will never be small again." The long quiet had come. The final blow had been struck. And in that silence, Lena found the beginning of a new life. One not built on him, but on her own strength.